So I wanted to share how I make my sourdough. Not that I'm any expert, but it seems to work well for me. So first of all, I take my sourdough starter. I keep it in the refrigerator so that I do not have to feed it as often, and it tends to last longer. I'm going to take this out and let it warm up for an hour or two ahead of time so that it will get nice and bubbly, and I think this helps it to start rising faster. I'm going to take about half of my sourdough starter and put it into the bowl, and then I'm going to refeed the other half before putting it back in the refrigerator. I add half a cup of flour and then half a cup of water. I mix it up really good. Just a quick note, I like these deli containers for storing my sourdough. They seem to work really well, and you can kind of see how they're doing since they're transparent. Okay, it's time to start putting our dough together. I'm going to use an electric scale because I think weighing our ingredients gives us a more consistent result. So I'm going to add 500 grams of flour as the base of my recipe. I want to add about 2% of that weight in salt, so that comes out to about 10 grams. I'm going to add 300 grams of water. That, with the moisture that's already in the starter, gives me a good consistency to my dough. It's not too sticky, but it's not too dry. We're going to mix this together. I'm not trying to get a nice smooth dough. We're not kneading this dough. I want it just roughly to incorporate as much of the flour as I can. I'm mixing it a little bit with my hands just to kind of shape it up. And that's it. I'm going to leave it alone and not touch it again for half an hour. During this half hour, the bread has begun to what we call autolyse. This means that the yeast is starting to break down the flour and it's getting to be a more doughy consistency. What I'm going to do is take corners and stretch over the top, just folding the dough in on itself multiple times, and then go around several times and then kind of shape it back into a ball. We're going to put it there to rest. I'm going to recover it with my plastic wrap, and we're going to set it aside again for another 30 minutes. Okay, we're going to repeat the folding process. Notice the dough is getting stretchier, it's getting smoother, it really is starting to look good. We're going to cover this up one more time, wait another 30 minutes. We're going to fold it one more time before transferring it over to a bowl to rise in. Now, you don't have to switch bowls. This one will be completely fine to let it rise in, but I like to use one of these graduated containers that lets me see when the dough has doubled in size, because that's what we're going for. We're going to try to set it aside, and we're going to allow it to rise till it's double in size, which may take 3 or 4 hours. Of course, that's dependent on the temperature. The warmer it is, the faster it will rise. If you want to slow it down, you can put it in the refrigerator. Anyway, once it's doubled in size, I'm ready to shape it into a loaf so I can let it rise. I'm going to start by sprinkling some flour on the table to let me work without it sticking to everything. I'm going to dump the dough out, and I'm going to start by stretching and folding again. I'm going to rotate it again, stretch and fold, and eventually try to work it into a nice little ball to put into a bowl and let rise. Now, you can use a regular bowl if you like. I have these Banneton baskets, which are just a wicker basket with a linen lining. These are kind of traditionally used. You can get them in a couple of different shapes. I would flour this though really well, whatever you're using. You're going to put your dough in there, kind of shape it, make sure that the top is sort of pinched shut. And I'm going to use just a plastic bag. We're going to put it over that, and I'm going to stick it into the refrigerator and let it rise overnight. Now, we're going to cook our bread in a Dutch oven. I have a couple of varieties here. I have a smaller one and a larger camp Dutch oven. I like to use the bigger one just because it lets me cook a bit of a larger loaf. It doesn't really matter, but we're going to start by turning our oven up to 500 degrees. I'm then going to put the Dutch oven in there, and I'm going to let it heat up for probably 20 to 30 minutes to get nice and warm before I start cooking. Now, we're going to take the dough out of the refrigerator. You can do it on the counter in a shorter amount of time. I like doing it in the refrigerator because it makes the dough stiffer, it's easier to work with, but it does take about 12 hours to rise. Now, I have this bread sling. It's a useful thing I got on Amazon. It lets you put the dough in and out of the Dutch oven without burning yourself. Before I had this, I used some parchment paper. It works the same. Now I'm going to score along the edge. This will let the bread expand. It's going to split open, but this gives you a bit more control over where it splits. I'm going to make a few more cuts. You can try to be creative, make some patterns. I was going for some sort of a shock of wheat or something here. The dough while it rises. Now, I'm going to put it into my Dutch oven, which is heated. I'm going to put the lid on it. We're going to set it in the oven, and we're going to set the timer for 20 minutes.
20 minutes later.
And so now we're going to open the oven and take a look at what we've got. It looks great. It smells great. We're going to put it back in the oven. We're going to leave the lid off this time. We're going to reduce the temperature to 470 degrees and let it crisp up and get nice and brown. It probably takes 5 or 10 minutes. And that's really all there is to it. Take the bread out, let it cool, and you have yourself a sourdough loaf. Enjoy.